Hi, my name is Katherine Clark, and this is my case study of a second grade English language learning student, Manny. Manny is a second grade student at the school I teach at in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He seems comfortable with both Spanish and English, but does struggle in class at times. During the weekly reading selection tests, he works at a table with his teacher or a paraprofessional to help him read through the questions. While he worked great with me, I know his teacher has some trouble with him acting out or not staying on task. He is currently in a classroom with 3 other English language learners, 2 other Spanish-speaking students, and 1 Chinese-speaking student. There is also an English language learner paraprofessional that works in the classroom on certain days with these students. He does not get any one-on-one instruction with this teacher, but does get some support during small groups. He says that he began learning English when he was 6 years old. His dad taught him Spanish and his mom taught him English. His dad is from Atlanta, Georgia, and his mom is from Texas. Manny was born in, as he says, around this area. One reason he likes knowing 2 languages is being able to help other English language learners. He described a time when he helped an older student who was newer to learning English and how it made him feel smart. Manny says he is fluent in both English and Spanish. I never had a chance to hear him speak Spanish, but even if I did, I would not be able to assess him as if he is actually in Spanish because I do not understand it. He is easily understood in English and is usually able to get across his point. He is very shy at first, but seemed to warm up a little. He also seemed to focus on trying to give me the right answer even when we were talking about himself. There were times that he would be confused by what I was asking and I would have to reword my question or come at the question a different way. He also admits to at times mixing up English and Spanish words. He used the example of saying perro instead of saying dog. He seems to be able to switch between the language with ease when speaking. My time with Manny was often short as I had to get back to my own classroom. So our writing activity using the I remember lesson from the text was much shorter than it suggested. I quickly moved Manny from brainstorming to a rough draft, as you can see here. Writing about himself seemed to be a new experience for Manny, as well as describing an event using different senses other than sight. During the brainstorming, for instance, he went off topic when I asked him to describe what he smelled on the day he did a backflip on a tramp. Instead of talking about that event, he talked about smelling mashed potatoes and broccoli. Getting off topic seems to be a reoccurring problem for Manny. For instance, instead of spending a lot of time talking about the time he did a backflip on a trampoline, he spent most of his draft, as you can see, talking about the morning before it even happened. I even had to remind him, as he was finishing his writing, to add the event he had originally been brainstorming about. One thing that I was very impressed about was that he was able to self-correct his work, as you can see in the last sentence. He would constantly go back and reread what he had already written, and he realized that he had left out I did in the sentence, I did a backflip and my cousin did a front flip, and he was able to fix it on his own. The reason I believe that he is not quite fully in the transitional stage is that he uses and, or as you can see here, he uses an or in, as a way to end a thought and transition to a new one, instead of using punctuation. He is also still using quite a bit of phonetic or invented spelling for both English, as you can see with cookout, and Spanish, where he says she called, and he's trying to write tia or aunt. Yet he also struggled with figuring out how to spell the word trampoline. Instead of spelling trampoline, he writes jampoline or champerline. He is able to spell many words conventionally, however, and has a good knowledge of sentence structure and vocabulary. According to Manny's teacher, he is at a 2.0 to 2.3 AR reading level. I chose to work with inferring with Manny because I think it is an important skill that can be applied to a lot of different situations. I found it helps students go deeper into a story and increase their comprehension. I chose to practice inferring with some short poems because of our time constraints. I would normally use this activity as an introduction to inferring. I started out by asking Manny if he had ever done anything with drawing inferences or conclusions before. He said he had not. So I did a quick explanation about what inferring meant. We talked about how you take clues from the story and what you already know, putting them together to figure something out or to read between the lines. That is what drawing a conclusion or inferring means. I helped Manny read through both the poems we read because he was struggling with sounding out many of the words. We then went back through each poem, breaking down each stanza to try to figure out what the item the poem was talking about was. For each paragraph, we talked about what the poem was saying, what we already knew about those things, and what we could possibly conclude from that. This was very hard for Manny. I had to do a lot of guiding and modeling. When we got to the 10th poem, the one that is seen on the screen, I had to explain a lot of the clues. He did not have any background knowledge of circus tents being called big tops or camping. When he was making guesses, he was going off of things like fires, sleeping bags, marshmallows, s'mores, and not quite getting that it was a tent we were looking for. When I did guide him and model what I was thinking, he could not come up with the word tent. He said he knew what it was, but didn't know the word. So I asked him if he could draw. As you can see, he was able to easily draw a tent. In the future, I would suggest that Manny continues to work on these reading comprehension strategies because I do think it would help him. When I was observing him with his teacher, he did struggle a lot on the reading selection test when it was asking him to draw conclusions instead of answering questions that were straight facts from the story. I learned a lot from Manny. Most importantly, I learned that it is important to find out the student's background. What experiences they have with their first and second language can make a big impact on what type of strategies you would work with on that student. I would also make sure I would increase their background knowledge so that when they are trying to draw conclusions or infer or write about things, that their background knowledge would be able to support them in drawing those conclusions. I also learned that while activities were new and sometimes difficult for Manny, he was still learning something and that it could be built on in the future. I also learned that it is important to have direct instruction on different strategies so that students know what you are referring to. I would also think it would be a good idea to have a list of the strategies that have already been taught posted in the room for students to refer to. Thank you for listening to my case study of a second grade student.